If some of you guys are upset that I'm not looking at May Day and Phantom episodes, may I remind you that I do not keep up with all the cartoons. I may get into most of the cartoons whenever I'm not burned out from them, but at the same time, looking at these shows after when I get older and older, I usually have different perspectives. But if I have the same perspective as Day and Phantom, but still not have the interest into watching more episodes from this show, then just understand that I'm really doing everything that I can in order to make you guys see a Day and Phantom review, or review from a cartoon or live action show that you want me to review. But at the same time, there are other cartoons that are considered modern and also that can cut my interest the most. But for this occasion, I'm gonna be reviewing the Day and Phantom Halloween episode called Fright Night. It starts off with Dane finding off another ghost creature from the ghost zone, and after getting knocked back from it, Dane knocks out a paint can and it lands on Dash's jacket, who is the bully of the show in high school. Then we see Lance, who stopped the fight between Dash and Danny. Now, I honestly think that his motivations involving having the two characters doing something to do a competition with each other is obviously real, but at the same time, since that this is taking place on Halloween, he wants to have a abandoned house so that they can throw a Halloween party at. So he completely wants Danny and Dash to throw the scariest Halloween abandoned house in order to have the Halloween party taking place, so that they won't be able to, and not only that, they won't be able to have any detention if they're the winner. So Dash and Danny have a competition with each other. Well, if Danny wins, he wants Dash to run around in the school parking lot in his underwear. But if Dash wins, he wants Danny to eat his dirty underwear. I honestly think that this is pretty much a great rivalry between Danny and Dash, and even though that I don't watch the show that much, I can really tell that this is pretty much the best moments I've seen involving Dash. Seriously, he's really not a hateable bully. He's actually kind of a likable bully. Whenever he does this kind of stunts against Danny, it's actually kind of amusing if you ask me. Unfortunately, none of Danny's friends found Danny's ideals as a haunted house really good. So Sam decides to help by giving Danny a book about the Chronicles of the Fright Night. Well, it talks about the Solar Shredder sword and the fact that the Fright Night's abandoned house is also abandoned castle or haunted castle is one of the most scariest things that Danny has seen. So it might be able to get the improvement from Lancer. And I really have to say, the way that Danny completely decorate the whole place is just amusing. Why? Well, for one, we all know that Danny isn't really the best at decorating stuff. And considering that he had to whip off stuffed animals from his sister, that's actually also amusing. And to add the reasons onto why Danny needed to go to the ghost zone is the fact that the weapons that he had is just really, really childish. Believe me. I honestly think that Danny really had so many issues on trying to become really popular during the school time. He isn't like Timmy, but at the same time, he really went through a lot when it comes to high school. As much as elementary and high school are completely different from each other, Danny and Timmy's lives are mostly similar, despite the fact that Timmy has fairy godparents and Danny has ghost powers. So Danny goes to the ghost zone in order to get the shredder sword, or the soul shredder that is attached from the pumpkin. And after he releases it, not only the skeletons come to life, but also the Fright Night. And I have to say, the Fright Night is probably one of the greatest design villains I've seen from the show. And the fact that he's really menacing and he mostly takes this seriously even during the Halloween season. Besides, when Danny completely returns back to the real world, he uses the sword, which actually makes the entire mansion the entire house an actual haunted house. I really am into add more situations on the stuff that Danny does in this, or what Danny does in this episode. The Fright Night can actually sense his sword, which leads to another situation where Danny, who is just trying to give Lance a tour of his haunted house, facing the Fright Night. You know, I honestly think that this episode, watching it for the first time, is really interesting on the fact that this is Danny Phantom we're talking about. Unlike Fairly Odd Parents, while they tried to make 11-minute episodes really good, despite the fact that they made their own Halloween episode 22 minutes long, Danny Phantom actually makes this episode a lot more entertaining, mainly the fact that the other characters are mostly in the situation while Lancer is really unflinched on what he sees. And what I mean by that is the fact that whenever he sees the ghosts behind him or around him, like the spider in this image, he just actually gives Stanley a more better grade than Dash's, since that his haunted house is actually scarier. And the reasons onto why I have nothing against Lancer's reactions is because he's getting too old, and he's the type of people who are just the straight man who just doesn't usually have any reaction to anything. Okay, straight mans do have reactions, but for what this episode is trying to do, Lancer just doesn't actually feel that shocked that there's a giant spider behind him. And as for Dash's haunted house, considering that he's also an athlete, his haunted house is obviously better than Danny's haunted house, especially the installed roller coaster in it. I know it's not really much of a roller coaster since that it's not fast paced, but at the same time it's actually really humorous onto how Dash managed to do all this, even if it's with his friends, to completely make this haunted house a reality. So I honestly think that they probably made this episode a lot better when it comes to Lancer's reaction, because when the Fright Night sends Tucker and Lancer to the dimension of the worst nightmares, he actually flinched for real this time. And I really have to say that that's probably one of the best moments I've seen, mainly the fact that we actually get to see a reaction from Lancer. And the fact that you actually see most of this stuff mostly fake. I can really tell that they really found a way to make the other characters not see the serious stuff that Danny has went through when he's going ghost. And I have to admit that Tucker's nightmare is obviously hilarious, because again, he's mostly the comic relief of this show. As for the fight between Danny and Fright Night, it's really enjoyable, especially when Sam gives Danny some tips on to stop the Fright Night. Believe me, I actually think that this fight, even though that there's gonna be later episodes that can top this fight, I really think that they really know how to make the weakness from a villain a really good way to make this a true Halloween episode. Since this is taking place during Halloween, they wanted to make the Fright Night a really serious Halloween character while trying to actually make him a lot more menacing and serious. I have to say that what he's been doing in this episode, just trying to get the sword that Danny stole from him, his motivations really make sense on what he's trying to actually accomplish, what he's trying to do in order to take over Manly Park, because without his sword, most of the objects around him turn into monsters or ghosts. So I honestly think that his purpose into gaining his sword back is literally the only way to actually take over the world. But at the same time, Danny found a way. He completely take the staff away. He still has the sword, and you completely place the Soul Shredder back onto a pumpkin, because as it's told, if you put that sword on a pumpkin, it completely not only stops the Fright Night, but also completely eliminates all the ghosts in Emily Park. And I have to say, the way that they tried to make a zombie apocalypse in this episode, when it comes to the outside, of the haunted house really makes this a true Halloween episode. I know I keep saying true Halloween episode in a stupid way, but at the same time, I'm not in the Halloween spirit, and this is really the best I can tell. Sorry for being a bit negative, but at the same time, I need to at least do something for this month, instead of just skipping like I did in 2018 and 2016. I know I didn't mention about Danny's parents in this episode, but one little note about the main plot is the fact that Danny uses her parents' technology in order to make most of the stuff happen. And considering that he went to the ghost zone, it actually does make sense. Now, what the parents do in this episode is that they're always hunting for ghosts no matter what. It's basically that the parents are dysfunctional, but not in a way that are really dysfunctional. They're dysfunctional for going after ghosts while also embarrassing Danny in public. In my opinion, I honestly think that the purpose in this episode is to actually have Danny not do any ghost material, because from what I heard, Danny isn't really good enough to handle the ghost material in front of his parents. Well, for what I know from this episode. As far as I'm concerned, I honestly think that what they're trying to do involving Danny's parents in this episode is just trying to have the plot move forward. And the fact that we only get to see a few cameo appearances or minor appearances from his parents in this episode, that's pretty much saying a lot. Because at the end of the episode, well, Danny decided to convince Lancer that he cheated, despite that Lancer didn't care whatsoever. Danny's parents completely squirted the ghost stuff on Lancer, which completely changed his mind on having Dash the winner. Not only that Danny gets detention, but he's also grounded, because he did something that he shouldn't have done in the first place. You know, this punishment at the end of having Danny eating Dash's dirty underwear is honestly a punishment that is mostly justifiable for what Danny has been doing in this episode, but at the same time, for what this show is just trying to do involving Danny's situations and adventures or action scenes involving ghost material and his high school life, I really think that most of this stuff actually kind of works for what he's trying to do, of what any other high school has gone through. Granted, granted, we don't usually go ghost, but at the same time, if we're ever in a situation where we're having a battle between one of our rivals that scored on making a very scary haunted house and completely try to do this kind of stuff, I think this is something that can actually happen in the real world if most of the stuff actually happens in the real world, which they don't. So what can I say about this episode? I will say that even though I don't like Halloween that much anymore, I still think I completely enjoyed this Halloween episode a lot more than I thought. Mainly the fact that the Fright Night was really entertaining, and the fact that Danny needs to do everything he can in order to convince Lancer that his place is actually haunted, even though he cheated. And like I mentioned, the rivalry between Danny and Dash is something I have nothing against with. I can easily watch this episode whenever I'm in the Halloween mood, which I'm not usually in that much. Maybe next year or the year after that, I might watch this episode again, but as of now, I'm giving this episode an 8 out of 10.